Chapter 1111. Kawashima Hiroji grabbed Su Chongsheng by the neck one by one, and then lifted Su Chongsheng up. The dignified Yaoshengu elder did not even have the slightest resistance at this moment. Su Chongsheng's face was flushed, and he felt a sense of suffocation. "Let go of Elder Su!" Seeing this, another elder shouted angrily and walked towards Kawashima Hiroichi. "Humph, just like you, how dare you yell at our big brother!" Kawashima Hiroji snorted coldly and slapped the elder with one hand, killing the elder directly. The blood splashed, and this time, the faces of the people in Yaoshengu changed greatly. You must know that these elders were all Wuzongs, and they were shot to death by a palm, which shows the strength of these island warriors. Damn! Seeing this, Gulinger directly took out a dagger that shone with cold light, and stabbed Kawashima Hiroji fiercely. Kawashima Hiroji's face was full of disdain, and he didn't even look at Gulinger. "Second brother, I will deal with this flower girl." Kawashima Hirozo jumped up one by one, and then slashed at Gulinger's wrist with a palm. Gulinger only felt a numbness in her wrist, and the dagger in her hand fell to the ground. But then Gulinger's spiritual power turned, and he patted Kawashima Hirozo on the shoulder. Kawashima Hiroji didn't dodge or shoot, so he was slapped on the shoulder by Gulinger. When this palm was slapped, Gulinger only felt like she was slapped on a copper wall and an iron wall, and the shock caused a faint pain in her arm. Such a beautiful flower girl, it's not good to use a knife and a gun. Kawashima Hirozo reached out and grabbed Gulinger. Gulinger was shocked, and she quickly retreated, avoiding Kawashima Hirozo. The third one, it's important to do business. When you kill that David, you're playing with your woman. After Kawashima Hiroji finished speaking, he looked coldly at Su Chongsheng in his hand. "Now you only need to hand over that David, and I can promise not to embarrass you again, otherwise, none of the people here will want to live." Su Chongsheng shook his head. "Our valley master is not here, he is not." Kawashima Hiroichi frowned. "Aren't you really afraid of death?" Su Chongsheng didn't speak, but in his firm eyes, it could be seen that he was indeed not afraid of death. "Humph!" Kawashima Hiroichi snorted coldly, knocked Su Chongsheng out with one palm, and then grabbed an ordinary disciple of Medicine God Valley. "I don't believe it, the people here are not afraid of death. I ask you, where is that David?" Kawashima Hiroji asked the ordinary disciple of the Medicine God Valley. I don't know." That ordinary disciple of Medicine God Valley was trembling with fright, feeling the aura of Kawashima Hiroichi, and was about to urinate. However, he was afraid and did not reveal David's position. "Damn, it seems that you don't want to live anymore." Kawashima Hiroichi said it, and he crushed the head of the ordinary disciple of Yaoshengu. When Kawashima Koichi's gaze swept across the others, everyone backed away in fright. There is no way, in the face of absolute strength, they are lambs that have been slaughtered, and there is no room for resistance. "I ask you, where is David now?" Some of you say, "I can let him enjoy inexhaustible glory and wealth." Kawashima Hiroji asked the disciples of the Medicine God Valley. Unfortunately, no one spoke, and no one stood up. This Kawashima Hiroichi almost died of anger, so he waved his hand, and a terrifying breath swept away. Rumbling! With this big wave of his hand, more than a dozen ordinary disciples of Medicine God Valley all fell into a pool of blood. "Remember, if you don't say anything, you will all die." Kawashima Hiroichi roared with murderous expression. Su Chongsheng looked at the corpses of the disciples of the Medicine God Valley all over the ground, and his face became extremely complicated. He believed that Kawashima Koichi, if David was not handed over, these island warriors would definitely wash the Medicine God Valley blood. Chapter 1112. "Brother, these guys are tough, I have a way. Let's talk." Kawashima Hiroji jumped into the depths of Yaoshin Valley. Immediately afterwards, there were bursts of screams and crying, and soon Kawashima Hiroji came back with 2 children in his hands. The 2 children were crying loudly in the second-hand doll of Hiroji Kawashima. "Let go of my child, let go of my child." At this time, a middle-aged woman ran over with disheveled hair. She didn't care whether Kawashima Hiroji was a martial artist or not. This middle-aged woman was just an ordinary person, and she couldn't watch her child be taken away. The middle-aged woman ran to Kawashima Koji and wanted to take the child away. But where did she have Kawashima Koji's strength? And finally the middle-aged woman bit Kawashima Koji's arm fiercely. As the saying goes, women are inherently weak, but mothers are strong. Some people want to rob their children, and of course middle-aged women refuse, so the most crazy power erupts. This bite instantly bit Kawashima Koji's arm with a bloodstain. Seeing this, Kawashima Koji was furious and kicked out, directly kicking the middle-aged woman away. Seeing this, Gulinger and Xiaolan hurriedly stepped forward to catch the middle-aged woman, but unfortunately the middle-aged woman was just an ordinary person, so how could she withstand the kick of Kawashima Koji? I saw the middle-aged woman bleeding from her nose and mouth, her eyes wide open, and she had long since lost her breath. Seeing this, Su Changshen's eyes were instantly filled with anger. "Let these 2 children go, they are just ordinary people, not people in the martial arts. It's too despicable for you to do this. There are many ordinary people living in Yaishin Valley." Just now, Kawashima Hiroji broke into the places where ordinary people lived and arrested 2 children. "Mommy, mommy!" The 2 children were crying loudly, and they kept calling for mother. It's a pity that they don't know it yet, and their mother will never come back to them at this moment. Kawashima Koji's actions completely aroused the anger of all the disciples of Yaishengu. At this moment, there is no fear in their hearts, and there is only endless anger and murderous intent. All Yaishengu disciples took a few steps forward, tightly surrounding the 5 island warriors in the middle. An endless murderous aura enveloped the 5 island warriors. "Hand over that David, I can let these 2 children go, or I'll make them into a pulp." Kawashima Hiroji is not afraid at all, even if it arouses the anger of everyone, he has nothing to be afraid of, this is the performance of strength. Su Chongsheng looked at the 2 crying children. Although he was angry, there was nothing he could do. He was in a dilemma. "I'll give you 3 seconds to think about it," Kawashima Koji said, and began to count. 3, 2. Su Changshen's forehead was covered in cold sweat. This was the most difficult decision he had ever made. Should he save the 2 children and hand over David, or would he use the lives of all the people in the whole valley to save David? 1. After the word was spoken, Kawashima Hiroji directly lifted the 2 children up, and now as soon as he let go, the 2 children would be thrown to death. "Stop!" At this critical moment, Long Wu came. "Mr. Long!" Seeing Long Wu, Su Chongsheng hurried up to meet him. Kawashima Hiroji looked at Long Wu, "Who are you?" Long Wu ignored him, but looked at the child in Hiroji Kawashima's second hand, so he said to Long Wu, "Go and call David." "Mr. Long? If the Valley Master comes, he can." Su Chongsheng looked at the 5 island warriors, he was afraid that David would not be the opponent's opponent at all. After all, these are 5 8th-rank martial sects, among them, the strength of Kawashima Hiroichi has faintly reached the peak of martial sect. Go and call him, otherwise if he finds out, his life will be uneasy. Long Wu knew David. If David knew, he sacrificed so many people, even his children, in order to save himself. David would definitely blame himself for the rest of his life. Chapter 1113. Seeing this, Su Chongsheng could only nod his head, and then went to call David. "We're going to call David, you can put the child down." Long Wu looked at Kawashima Koji and said, "When I see David, I will naturally let them go." Kawashima Koji smiled coldly. "Now, we can only wait for David to arrive." Su Chongsheng walked quickly to David's room. At this time, David was sitting cross-legged, and his spiritual sense entered the map of 90,000 miles of mountains and rivers to cultivate. Valley Master. Su Chongsheng pushed David gently. David's consciousness returned in an instant, and when he opened his eyes and saw that it was Su Chongsheng, David asked in surprise, "Elder Su, what's wrong?" David knew that if Su Chongsheng had nothing urgent, he would not have easily woken him up from his practice. The owner of the valley, the killer of the island country found here, and is now in the valley, wanton massacre. Su Chongsheng said with a look of grief and indignation. When David heard this, he instantly turned into a streamer and rushed out. Su Chongsheng followed closely behind him. When David arrived, looking at the corpse on the ground and the two children in Hiroshi Nakawahima's second hand, anger flared in his eyes. "I am David Chen, you are going to kill me and let the child go." David looked at Kawashima Koji coldly, and said in a cold voice. Kawashima Hiroshi looked at David, and then smiled lightly, "You finally showed up, I thought you were always going to be a tortoise. Second brother, you really have two strokes. Using this method, you directly forced this David out." Kawashima Hirozo chuckled. "Of course. Do you think I'm just like you, with only women in my eyes? You have to know how to use your brain." Kawashima Hiroji said proudly. "Mommy, mommy!" The two children screamed as they struggled in Kawashima Koji's hands. "Ha ha ha, I'll send you to find your mother." After Kawashima Koji finished speaking, he directly threw the two children out. Seeing this, David jumped up and grabbed the two children tightly. However, when the two children were in David's hands, they no longer cried and lost their breath of life. David hurriedly found out two spiritual powers and wanted to save the two children, but he found that Kawashima Koji had used his strength to save the two children. The internal organs of the two children were shattered. David slowly put down the two children, gritted his teeth and looked at the 5 island warriors in front of him. "Damn you, all of you Icelanders should die." David's murderous aura rose up, and then filled the entire Yaeshin Valley. As for the other Yaeshengu disciples, seeing that the other party killed even 2 children, they were all angry and stared at the 5 island warriors with red eyes. Now they can't wait to rush forward and swallow these 5 people alive. You don't have to be so angry, because soon, you will go to see the king of H3LL just like these 2 children. Kawashima Hiroichi smiled coldly. Killing 2 children is a normal thing for them. With trembling hands, Su Chongsheng picked up the 2 children, tears like a river estuary bursting. Gulinger and the other girls were all crying, and anger erupted from their bodies. All Medicine God Valley disciples obeyed the order and killed these 5 beasts. Even if they lose the lives of all my Medicine God Valley disciples, they mustn't let the 5 beasts leave. Su Chongsheng raised his voice to the sky and commanded loudly. Kill these 5 beasts! Kill these 5 beasts! All the disciples in Yaeshengu shouted angrily. At this moment, they did not have the slightest fear. Even if they died, they would never take a step back. Ha ha ha, just relying on you ants, it's easy to kill you. Kawashima Hiroichi laughed. Chapter 1114. People like Yaeshengu, in their eyes, are nothing more than ants, and there is no threat at all. Everyone backs me up. I'm enough to deal with them alone. Today, of the 5 beasts, none of them can leave. David slowly clenched his fists and ordered loudly. He knew that these people rushed up and were slaughtered. The huge gap in strength cannot be made up by the number of people. Valley Master. Su Chongsheng didn't understand why David wanted to do it alone, knowing that the strength of the other 5 people was not low. Back up! David commanded loudly again. Seeing this, Su Chongsheng could only take the Medicine God Valley disciples back. David! Gulinger and Xiolan stepped forward, they were worried about David. You guys also step back, I'll be fine. David gave the two a firm and confident look. You two listen to David, come back. Long Wu also said at this moment. Long Wu believed in David because he felt an unprecedented breath from David. Gulinger and Xiaolan also stepped back, and only David faced the 5 island warriors. Boy, you are really funny. You dare to challenge us alone. Today I will take your head to receive the reward. Kawashima Koichi sneered. Immediately afterwards, a terrifying aura erupted from Kawashima Koichi's body. In an instant, a gust of wind blew, and at the foot of Kawashima Koichi, a huge deep pit appeared, as if a huge explosion had occurred. David looked at Kawashima Koichi, and his breath exploded instantly. Boom! An incomparably tyrannical coercion filled David's body, directly crushing Kawashima Koichi's breath without any resistance. The two breaths were constantly colliding, but the breath of Kawashima Hiroichi, after touching David's coercion, was like a mouse meeting a cat, without the slightest resistance. Kawashima Hiroichi's expression changed, and then his body flew out. The huge force made Kawashima Hiroichi's body slammed into the mountain, causing the rocks to crack and the rocks to fly. Kawashima Koichi's mouth overflowed with blood, looking very embarrassed. And David's eyes are cold, killing intent is awe-inspiring. Seeing this, the other warriors opened their mouths in shock. They couldn't believe that David had such strength, and Kawashima Hiroichi suffered a big loss when he shot. And everyone in Yaoshengu was also amazed, none of them thought that David's strength increased so rapidly. David, your strength has increased a lot. Long Wu said with a look of relief. The peak of Wuzong is no longer my opponent. David nodded towards Long Wu. Ha ha ha, today these 5 unlucky guys can't escape. After listening to Long Wu, he laughed loudly. David looked at the 5 island warriors coldly, took a step forward and said, Today I will let you 5, life is better than death. This time, several island warriors all put aside their contempt, their faces full of solemnity. They underestimated David's strength from the very beginning. Even the peak of Wuzong was not David's opponent. It seemed that the 5 of them should be cautious. Na Kawashima Hiroji walked back in embarrassment and looked at David coldly. Boy, if we add the 5 together, a peak of Wuzong can't be compared. In my eyes, you are nothing but stinky SHT, you are not even worthy of a martial artist. After David finished speaking, golden light flashed on his body in an instant, followed by layers of scales wrapping David's body. His unparalleled fleshly body glowed dazzlingly under the sunlight. The undead golden body of the Valley Master is getting more and more domineering. Looking at David, Su Chongsheng said slowly. Chapter 1115. Baga, today you have to die, all of you have to die. Kawashima Hiro shouted angrily, followed by a terrifying breath all over his body. In an instant, mists began to rise from the top of Kawashima Koichi's head, followed by a piercing and sharp cry. Kawashima Koichi's body instantly disappeared into the fog, and then he instantly reached David and smashed at David with a punch. Humph, the little trick of carving insects. David greeted him with a punch. Not bad, golden body can let him ignore Kawashima Koichi's attack. Boom! The two fists collided, and after a blast, Kawashima Hiroichi's terrifying aura was instantly defeated. Immediately afterwards, Kawashima Koichi's arm bent strangely towards the back, and the white bones pierced through the skin and exposed. This time, Kawashima Hiroji was startled, followed by a dangerous breath, which instantly made his hair explode. Withdraw! Kawashima Koichi quickly stepped back. Among the 5 of them, only he is the strongest, but even if he is close to the strength of the peak of Wuzong, in front of David, there is no chance of winning. None of you want to leave. After David finished speaking, he jumped up and slapped it down with a palm. Bright golden light flickered in the sky, and David's palm directly enveloped Kawashima Hiroichi. Upon seeing this, Kawashima Hiroji gritted his teeth, and with the other hand, he shot a terrifying upward force. But after this energy touched the golden light shot by David's palm, it instantly disappeared without a trace. Bang! A big pit was instantly formed on the ground, and Kawashima Hiroichi was slapped inside the big pit with a palm. This time, the other hurried warriors were dumbfounded, and looked at Kawashima Koichi, who was already embedded in the ground, in shock. None of them thought that the task that was supposed to be guaranteed by all means has now become like this. Big brother! The few remaining warriors shouted. Don't cry and howl, he's not dead, I won't let you die so happily. David said with a gloomy face. These beasts don't even let their children go, how could David let them die so easily? Just after David finished speaking, I saw Kawashima Hiroichi raised his head slightly. Although he was not dead, he was also seriously injured. Let's go back to China immediately, and report this matter to the Patriarch. Kawashima Hiroichi tried his best and said to the remaining 4 samurai. When the 4 samurai heard this, they completely ignored Kawashima Koichi, and turned around and ran away. You can't run away. After David finished speaking, the golden light on his body became more and more prosperous. Soon the remaining 4 warriors were wrapped in it. The 4 island warriors seemed to be stuck in a dead end and found that they could not escape no matter how much they ran. Seeing this, the 4 of them could only jump up in an instant, and then joined forces to move towards David. The sky was full of rays of light, and the 4 people drew out their samurai swords, and the sharp blades swung towards David again and again. Humph! David snorted coldly, but he didn't dodge or dodge, let the blade hit him, and bursts of fire blazing, but David's body was not injured in the slightest. These island warriors couldn't break David's body at all, and David's tyrannical body slammed directly towards several island warriors. Seeing this, several island warriors showed panic on their faces, followed by bursts of mist from everyone, and as the mist rose, the bodies of several island warriors also disappeared in an instant. Take care of Gu, these are ninjutsu. Seeing this, Su Chongsheng hurriedly shouted to David. The ninjutsu of the island warriors is very famous. A senior island warrior can completely rely on ninjutsu and disappear without a trace, and no one can find it. Chapter 1116. David knew that these people couldn't escape from the circle he set up. Although they were gone, they were definitely nearby. David waved his hand, and the dragon-slaying sword appeared in his hand. David held the dragon-slaying sword and used the 9 shadows sword technique. Soon 4 identical David appeared, and each David occupied a position. The dragon-slaying sword in his hand was swung, forming sword shadows one after another, and the terrifying sword energy raged in all directions, as if to strangle everything in the formation. Puff puff! A shower of blood was poured out, and soon the figures of several island warriors appeared. Everyone has wounds on their bodies, although they are desperately resisting with katana swords, but it is meaningless. David looked at Kawashima Koichi, obsidian-like eyes, exuding a cold and fierce light, giving people an infinite sense of oppression. The 2 children were killed by this Kawashima Koichi just now, and David wants this Kawashima Koichi to pay the price. Swish! The dragon-slaying sword in David's hand swung out. What? Na Kawashima Hongji let out a scream in an instant. I saw Na Kawashima Hiroji's arm, I saw one cut off, bleeding like a stream. Second brother. Seeing that Kawashima Hiroji saw that an arm was cut off, Kawashima Hiroji shouted, and then shouted, 4th brother, 5th brother, we must unite to prevent this David from approaching him body. As soon as Kawashima Hiroji's voice fell, he saw a figure flashing, and then David was already in front of him. You said that if you don't let me get close, I won't get close. David had a look of disdain on his face. Kawashima Hiroji was startled, and an instinctive punch smashed out at David. David reached out and grabbed the wrist of Kawashima Hirozo. Click! With a crisp sound, Kawashima Hirozo's arm was twisted instantly. Now among the 5 island warriors, only 2 are left with complete hands and feet. Kawashima Koichi, Kawashima Koji, and Kawashima Kozen all had their arms broken by David, using a diamond net. At this time, Kawashima Koichi, who was already dying, suddenly threw an object from his hand. Hiroshi Kawashima endured the severe pain, stretched out his hand to catch what Hiroshi Kawashima threw, and then threw it at David. A large net with a size of more than 10 square meters appeared in the air, and golden light flashed on the net. This was the last trick they used to carry out their mission. The Watanabe family spent a lot of money to buy this Vajra net from the western regions. The diamond net wrapped David in an instant, and then began to shrink continuously, causing David to curl up together, unable to move at all. Seeing that David was caught by the diamond net, several island warriors breathed a sigh of relief, and now David has become a lamb to be slaughtered. While he can't move, you still don't do it. Kawashima Hiroichi reminded loudly. Soon, the remaining 2 island warriors, wielding katana swords, stabbed towards David fiercely. Clang clang! But no matter how hard the 2 of them worked, there was no way to break David's physical defense. Second, third, you also do it. When Kawashima Koichi saw this, he could only let Kawashima Koji and Kawashima Kozen, who had broken his arm, also go up together. The 4 warriors joined forces and hit the diamond net with energy one after another, making the golden light on the diamond net even more dazzling. An unparalleled repressive force is suppressing David, and the diamond net is constantly shrinking, squeezing David's body. Soon, David's body was compressed into a spherical shape, and the whole person became extremely distorted. Okay, he can't escape, help me up quickly. Upon seeing this, Kawashima Hiroshi breathed a long sigh of relief, knowing that David could not escape. Chapter 1117. The other warriors in a hurry were also relieved. David's strength exceeded their expectations. If it wasn't for the diamond net to trap David, they would have been buried here. Although there is no way to break David's indestructible golden body for the time being, it has finally limited David's ability to move. As long as David is under control, the others will not be a problem. Seeing that David was bound by the diamond net, Su Chongsheng and Gu Lingar were very nervous and worried. David! Seeing this, Gu Lingar wanted to step forward to rescue David. Do not come! David hurriedly stopped Gu Lingar. With Gu Lingar's strength, rushing over would be dead. No effect at all. Gu Lingar stared blankly at David, who was bound, tears streaming down her face. Take this David out of here! Seeing that Gu Lingar was about to rush over, Kawashima Hiroshi ordered to the other hurried samurai. Of the 5 samurai, now 3 have been injured, and only 2 are still able-bodied. If Yaoshengu and these people rushed up together, Kawashima Koichi also felt very difficult. So he planned to take David out of here first. Jump! Just as the warriors were about to start taking David away, there was a sudden cracking sound. Everyone looked and found that the diamond net that controlled David had a silk thread broken. Jump! Then another thread broke. David's muscles radiated golden light, bulging constantly, resisting the suppressing force of the diamond net. This time, Kawashima Koichi and the others' expressions instantly became extremely ugly. This diamond net can be regarded as an artifact. Although it has experienced vicissitudes and is somewhat dilapidated, the artifact is an artifact after all. How can it be so easy to collapse? Brother, this... Kawashima Koji looked at the diamond net whose silk thread was broken, and said with surprise on his face. Don't worry, this diamond net is indestructible and won't break easily. Kawashima Hiroichi said, but his heart was beating drums. Kawashima Koichi is also not sure that this diamond mesh will not be broken, because the silk thread of the diamond mesh is still cracking at the moment. But Kawashima Koichi's words just landed, and the diamond net was torn apart in an instant. Immediately afterwards, a terrifying spiritual force struck. The 2 warriors who were standing near the diamond net and wanted to take David away were directly sent flying by this spiritual force. What? David gritted his teeth, still trying desperately, trying to completely tear the diamond net apart, and endless spiritual power spewed out. Bang! There was a loud noise, and soon the diamond net was completely shattered, and the fragments shot out towards the surroundings, and many surrounding trees were broken by these broken silk threads. The golden light on David's body suddenly appeared, and a coercion descended from the sky, making people dare not look directly. Seeing this situation, the 5 samurai were instantly stunned. And that Kawashima Hiroji took advantage of David's unsteady footing, and slashed at the back of David's neck with a fierce knife. He wanted to chop off David's head with a knife. Clang! There was a sound of metal collision, and then Kawashima Koji's arm went numb, and the samurai sword in his hand flew out directly. David's body only left a white mark, without the slightest injury. Kawashima Koji, who had already broken his arm, was now unable to pick up the samurai sword. David slowly turned around and looked at Kawashima Koji, who attacked him. Kawashima Koji looked at David's eyes, and his body trembled involuntarily. "I'll take you down first." David said it, stretched out his hand and grabbed it towards Kawashima Hiroji. Seeing this, Kawashima Hiroji was so frightened that he turned his head and ran, but he didn't run far at all, and was directly carried back by David. Kawashima Koji struggled in David's hands. Stab! David grabbed one of Kawashima Koji's arm and suddenly pulled hard. He ripped off Kawashima Koji's arm abruptly. Chapter 1118. This bloody scene shocked everyone. The screams of Kawashima Hiroji resounded throughout the Yaeshin Valley. Several other samurai looked at them with very ugly expressions. Although they wanted to go forward and rescue Kawashima Koji, no one dared to move. Stab! There was another tearing sound, and one of Kawashima's legs was torn off by David again. At this time, Kawashima Hiroji didn't even have the strength to scream. David's body was full of blood splattered, and his body exuded a thick murderous aura, like a god of death in H3LL. Even Gulinger and Su Chongsheng watched, and they were faintly frightened. They all thought that David was going crazy. In the shock of everyone, David directly tore off Kawashima Koji's limbs. At this time, Kawashima Koji was left with only one torso. Even so, Kawashima Hiroji did not die, and he still had a breath of life, suffering enormous pain. David threw Kawashima Koji, who had only one torso, in front of Su Chongsheng. "Elder Su, find a jar, throw this guy in it, and soak it in the liquid medicine. You can't let him die easily," David said to Su Chongsheng. "Gu Master, this..." Su Chongsheng was a little overwhelmed, he felt that this was too cruel. Seeing Su Chongsheng not moving, David frowned slightly. "Look at the 2 children who died in front of you, do you think I am cruel?" Su Chongsheng looked at the 2 dead children and the child's mother. Although his heart was also burning with anger, he was still a little helpless. "Do as I say, this is an order." David's face became extremely cold, and his voice increased instantly. Su Chongsheng shivered all over, and immediately waved his hand, asking someone to find the jar, soaking Kawashima Hiroji in it. Soon, the jar was found, and there was medicinal liquid in it. He threw Kawashima Hiroji inside, only his head was exposed, and he couldn't die in a short time. Seeing such a scene, in the eyes of several other warriors, one by one was frightened, and their courage was broken. They are not afraid of death, but this is the first time they have seen such a thing. David looked at Kawashima Koji coldly, with murderous intent in his eyes. "Soon, you will also be put into the jar, do you know what this is called?" David took a step forward slowly, scaring the warriors to back away in a hurry. "It's called a human stick, and such a cruel thing was invented by you Icelanders. Today I want you to taste what your ancestors invented," David said as he walked forward. "Baga, our island warriors would rather die than yield, and will never be humiliated by you." Kawashima Hiroichi roared loudly, we are from the Watanabe family. If you treat us like this, our ambassador will never let you go. Fukyu, let your ambassadors try. David stepped out in one step, and then threw a punch. The remaining 4 warriors struggled to support him, but they were not David's opponents at all. As soon as David stretched out his hand, the dragon-slaying sword appeared in the raging fire, followed by a burst of swords and swords. David did not kill them, but cut off the limbs of these warriors with the dragon-slaying sword. After just 10 minutes, the ground was littered with severed limbs, and the 4 samurais' mourning continued. David's whole body was already soaked in blood, and Gulinger and Su Chongsheng on the side were also terrified. David! Gulinger whispered to David. She was afraid that David would go crazy, and he would not recognize his 6 relatives and kill without blinking. David looked at Gulinger, and suddenly grinned, with a row of white teeth on his red-stained face. Chapter 1119. Are you afraid that I'm going crazy and don't even know you? David said jokingly. Gulinger saw that David had no problem with his mind, so he was relieved, so he gave David a blank look and said, I'm not afraid that you are going crazy. Gu Master, what about these people? After Su Chongsheng soaked Kawashima Hiroichi and the others in the jar, he asked David. David looked at a few people who were dying, and smiled coldly. I want to post them on the martial arts forum like this, and I want everyone to see that the killers sent by these island countries will end up. Su Chongsheng opened his mouth, probably trying to dissuade him, but in the end he didn't say anything. David, don't fall for your inner demon. At this moment, Long Wu rushed to speak. Uncle Long, don't worry, I'm measured. David nodded and said. Long Wu didn't say anything, but seeing David like this, he was even more afraid to show the video to David. If David saw the video, he would definitely go crazy, and he would definitely find the Long family. Soon, there was a big debate in the martial arts forum. David's approach, some people agree with, some people object. For a time, the martial arts forum formed 2 factions, arguing fiercely. David, this kid is awesome, really kind, treats the warriors of the island country, it should be like this, let these beasts have a taste. Well done, these island fellows, they deserve this. This David is too cruel. No matter what the reason is, he would not dare to do such a thing. It is too inhumane. Upstairs, what kind of virgin are you pretending to be? Haven't your ancestors been massacred by the Icelanders? The quarrel on the forum was so intense that it almost became a real fight. Fortunately, the forum was finally closed, and this slowly subsided. Kyoto, within the Martial Arts Alliance. Zhu Zishan looked at the photos posted by David on the forum, his face was gloomy and uncertain, and he didn't know what he was thinking. Leader, the second son must not be kept. This guy's strength is hard to fathom, and he is ruthless. Be careful of raising tigers. Guo Wei said to Zhu Zishan with a startled expression. Guo Wei knew that David had always been hostile to him. After all, Sonia was the one who caught the Martial Arts Alliance. If David is allowed to find out like this, then the next person to be killed may be himself. Go find a way to get rid of him, these island warriors are such fucking waste. Zhu Zishan said with a cold face. Okay, I'll go now. Guo Wei nodded, turned, and left. At the same time, in the Long family hall, Long Jingguo and Master Ding Chan also saw the content on the forum. The news of David in Yaishin Valley was brought back by Master Ding Chan and told to Long Jingguo, who directly informed the Martial Arts Alliance. Otherwise, several island warriors would not be able to find Yaishin Valley at all. This kid named David has a really good talent. He was able to kill 5 island warriors at a young age. I don't know who he is teaching, but his methods are a bit cruel. Master Ding Chan actually had some appreciation for David. After all, it is not easy for a martial artist as young as David to have the current strength. At this time, Long Jingguo didn't say a word, staring at a few island warriors who were made into adult sticks and soaked in the jar. David's cruelty made Long Jingguo feel a little horrified, and at the same time gave him a sense of crisis. He now only wants to let David die. The speed of David's strength development has exceeded his expectations. Master Ding Chan, I'll leave Xiao'er's injury to you. This time, after Xiao'er's injury is healed, he will step into the realm of Marquis Wu and let him go down the mountain and go home. Long Jingguo asked Master Ding Chan to bring Long Xiao back to the mountain for treatment, and let Long Xiao step into Wuhao and go down the mountain. For some reason, Long Jingguo was always worried that Long Xiao was not strong enough and would be killed by David. Chapter 1120. Don't worry, Patriarch Long, I will definitely find a way to heal Long Xiao and let him reach Marquis Wu after the year. Master Ding Chan said confidently. Long Jingguo nodded happily, and then said to Long Xingxiu who was on the side, Xingxiu, go get some Longchuan water and give it to Master Ding Chan to take away. Patriarch, I'm afraid there is less than a cup of Longchuan water now. Long Xingxiu said in a low voice. What? How come there are so few? When Long Jingguo heard this, his face suddenly turned cold. Patriarch, after the eldest young master took away the water from the Longchuan last time, there were very few drops of water in the Longchuan, and sometimes it took several days for a drop of water. Long Xingxiu explained. After Long Jingguo listened, he didn't say anything, but his face was very ugly. This Longchuan is a sacred spring in the Longjia manor. At that time, the ancestors of the Long family took root here, because there is a spring here, and clear spring water flows from a beautifully carved faucet. Later, it was named Longchuan, and this Longchuan water can nourish the body and improve the strength, which also made the Long family gain a firm foothold in Kyoto in a very short time, and become one of the best big families. It's just that with the passage of time, the spring water in Longchuan has become less and less, and it can only drop a drop in a few days. At this time, Long Jingguo remembered the legend that he had been in the Long family all the time. It is said that the day when the Longchuan water completely dried up was the day when the Long family was destroyed. Now there are fewer and fewer Longchuan water, which makes Long Jingguo feel a little uncomfortable. Although it is only a legend, Long Jingguo still believes it to some extent. Patriarch Long, without the dragon spring water, I can heal Long Xiao, don't worry. Seeing that Long Jingguo's face was ugly, Master Ding Chan said with relief. How did he know that what Long Jingguo was worried about was not Long Xiao's body, but the survival of the entire Long family? Kyoto, Dharma Protector Pavilion. Nagamura Masao was sitting on the chair with an angry face. On the main seat is Mr. Shi. Mr. Shi, I protest, I want to protest sternly, our island warriors have been subjected to such inhuman abuse, this David is simply a beast. Masao Nagamura slapped the table and growled loudly. Mr. Shi smiled and was not angry at Nagamura Masao's loud protest. Ambassador Nagamura, since you said these people are your island warriors, I hope you can show me the entry permits of these people. Although our Daxia is hospitable, it is by no means that anyone can come in casually without saying hello. If Ambassador Nagamura cannot provide the entry permits for these people, then I will consider these island warriors as spies who secretly infiltrated our country. In this case, I need Ambassador Nagamura to explain to me. Mr. Shi's remarks made Nagamura Masao suddenly dumbfounded. After seeing the photos on the forum, he rushed to protest angrily, forgetting that these island warriors had entered the country illegally. Mr. Shi, these people have changed beyond recognition. Whether they are warriors from our island country, I can't make up my mind for a while. When I go back to investigate and explain to Mr. Shi. Nagamura Masao had an apologetic smile on his face, and he had long since lost his arrogance. If it is really designated as a spy, this matter can be a big problem. Then I'll wait for Ambassador Nagamura's explanation. Mr. Shi still had a smile on his face. Nagamura Masao wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and then walked away in despair. This guy really shot himself in the foot. Seeing Nagamura Masao walk away in despair, Zhao Waoqi laughed. However, there was no smile on Mr. Shi's face at this time. Zhao Waoqi, this David's method is a bit cruel, and it was even announced. Such influence is too bad, Mu Xiu will be destroyed by Lin Feng, please advise him. Mr. Shi said coldly. Subordinates obey. Seeing that Mr. Shi was unhappy, Zhao Waoqi immediately made his legs tremble.